Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment in the Greenpark AI search series. I'm Sam Barker, head of omnichannel search here at Greenpark, and today I'm joined by Malta from Peek, who brings a level of data intelligence and AI understanding that very few teams have access to. Over the past year, we've watched a sort of quiet but fundamental shift take place for digital performance, which was previously defined by ranking positions, click volumes, and conversion paths. I think the entire industry trained itself to optimize for crawlers. I think AI search has really rewritten that playbook. So models don't reward just structure alone, and they reward things like coherence and consistency and trust signals across the entire ecosystem. And the brands with authority now are the ones who have a really unified footprint and unified digital ecosystem, not just a lovely, tidy website. So our session today is designed to move a little bit beyond the theory that we went through last month, and look at what LLMs actually respond to, how citations behave in the wild, and how brands can influence both visibility and preference inside these new environments. So I guess to set the stage, I want to sort of anchor us in the actual shift. I don't think AI search is just an extension of SEO. I think it's a completely parallel environment with its own logic and its own signals and really its own performance metrics, which is what we want to dig into a little bit more detail. And when models decide what brands to reference, they're not just reading all of those traditional indicators that we've seen over the years and that we've come to kind of optimize against. They're reading all of the different patterns across thousands of sources, and they're really trying to determine who can be trusted to explain the category accurately, not just that kind of brand voice. So, Malta, to kick us off, from your vantage point, how would you describe that change in measurement logic as brands are moving from those traditional SEO metrics to more of the kind of AI search and AI visibility metrics?
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest shift, actually, there are two big shifts.
Hmm.
One is what do I see as the result as a user, right? From SEO, traditionally I was used to 10 blue links, maybe some sub features, but at the end of the day, I can go from top to bottom and I can identify the entities that are ranking by the URL and by clickable links. And when I now look at an AI answer in a chatbot or some other kind of LLM-based search answer engine, I have traditionally some form of text, and I can identify entities within this text, but they are not necessarily links. Sometimes there are. Sometimes the
Hmm.
links that there are just going to third-party sources, not to the entities that are actually being mentioned. So the whole thing of what is a presence, what is a ranking, in what order am I ranking, this is completely different, up to a point where maybe the term ranking is actually wrong. Because even if I'm the brand that is mentioned first, if the second sentence starts with, but there is a better alternative, then me being the first mentioned brand is actually probably not the desirable state. And then the second thing is that traditional search was always based on the premise that people would click on a search result page on another website. Of course, not for every search, but if we think back a year, still something like 40% of Google searches ended in a click to a website. Now it's probably a little bit less because of AI overviews, but with something like Google's AI mode or also with ChatGPT, this is no longer the case. The systems try to answer my question in the chat interface. So unless I have some transactional goal, I don't actually need to leave the chat interface. So the click is kind of like going away. And the click was, of course, something where, thanks to the HTTP referrer, I could see it in my web analytics. I could attribute revenue very easily. And this is the big shift, I would say, that
Hmm.
what the results look like and the behavior of reading versus clicking is basically tilting a lot or shifting a lot. Those are the two big changes for me.
I think maybe what we're seeing on our side from managing this on like brands' behalf and trying to look at all of these AI visibility metrics and try and make sense of them broadly so that we can translate them into something tangible is that the metrics that truly matter are rooted in not just the kind of the clicks and the referrals that we previously would have spoken about. Is these are rooted in the clarity of the entity, the factual stability, looking at those sentiment patterns to see whether there's consistency across that messaging, and also consistency across all the different platforms that they're operating. So it's much broader and more strategic interpretation of what credibility looks like, rather than just going, I can see exactly where someone's entered the site. I can see where they've exited. I see where they've come from. I see what kind of content they've engaged with. It's much more unstructured in a way that means that we have to interpret it in a slightly different way. And I think that quite neatly takes me on to what I wanted to touch on next is looking at citations versus mentions. I think it's a difficult thing for brands sometimes to get their head around about fundamentally what is the difference. And I think sometimes they're offered a little bit interchangeably. And I want to make sure that on record there is a little bit of clarity between citations and mentions. So when we're talking about citations, we're talking about the visible surface. So the moments when a model or an LLM is confident enough to reference that brand directly in an answer. So if it said, according to Peak, it would be a citation. So it's that model signaling that it trusts all of that information, is prepared to present it in a user-facing response. Whereas I guess mentions are everything that sits underneath that. It's that engine that fuels those citations. It represents all of the different signals where the model learns from. It could be a review on a retailer site, it could be a marketplace listing, it could be a press article, FAQ page, a sustainability claim, every kind of rating snippet or piece of YouTube transcript. All of those mentions are fundamentally the input. And I think maybe what we're seeing a little bit is, because this is such an evolution of the way that we're approaching visibility and the way that we're approaching search, a lot of that input layer or that mentions layer is fragmented or inconsistent. And that means the next layer up, which is the citations, becomes a little bit unstable. So you may appear once and then vanish for a couple of weeks because the model doesn't have that really reliable footprint to draw from. And really what we want to kind of reiterate to brands is that strong mentions build all of that kind of scaffolding that the model needs before they can safely cite you. So citations only appear when that model sees enough consistency and credibility across information, and importantly across all of the different sources in which you operate. From the Peak side, are you seeing any distinctions in that data? And do you think brands are really of one understanding of the difference between mentions and citations? And do you think they need to fundamentally care about both of these layers?
Yeah, I would even add some complexity to it and say we also need to differentiate. Are we talking about brand mentions in the AI answer and brand mentions on the websites, right? So the first thing I look at is always the interface of the whatever LLM-based search and answer engine I'm using. In the text answer, there are often brands mentioned. These I would treat as like recommendations, right? Often without a link. And then we have the sources or citations where the LLMs get their information from. And I think the traditional SEO approach would be, I have to be the source of the AI overview. That's the goal, because then there's my link and maybe somebody clicks. And a few people still click, so it's not like it's a complete waste of time. But in, for example, ChatGPT or Google's AI mode, these clicks seem to be very low, like maybe 5%, maybe 1%. It's not clear, but a very, very, very small amount. So for most brands and most business models, it makes sense that my brand is recommended in the answer. And me being a source for the generation of the answer is, of course, one thing I can do to achieve that. But another thing I can do to achieve that is what you just mentioned, that my brand is mentioned on other websites across the internet, ideally on other websites that are currently used as the source, right? That can help me a lot. So if I put my relevant prompts into ChatGPT, and I see that it's never my websites that's being cited, it's also never my competitors, and it's always, I don't know, Wikipedia, and if I'm a software company, maybe G2, like a software review website, or some RAS publications like TechRadar, etc., then that is where I need my brand to be mentioned. That is where I have to be. Because if I can change how the sources, so the currently cited URLs, how they write about me, I can change the answer of the LLMs, sometimes immediately, because there's very little caching happening at the moment. So I think many SEOs are too focused on the source aspect, when the source in the end is just a tool to get your brand mentioned in the answer.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think it's looking at trying to merge all of these different points together, rather than it's what I mentioned before about that fragmented ecosystem and trying to maintain the consistency across that. But also there is no singular gold star metric. It has to look at edit holistically, and at visibility as a holistic metric, rather than just saying we just have to go after citations, or we just have to go after brand mentions, or we just need to look at how we activate across those different parts. And I think that filters into a lot of the conversations that we're having around potentially some of those conversion metrics. So on the last podcast episode, we spoke very briefly about the uncomfortability of the lack of clicks and kind of those shifting those metrics. And I think the next slightly uncomfortable conversation is that the conversion no longer depends on a click necessarily. So in these AI environments, the conversion starts so much earlier, and it's about what the user believes before they even reach your site. So if the model is consistent in framing the brand as credible, reliable, high quality, that shapes all of the preference like so much further before the traditional journey begins. And it's a completely different type of influence. So you're not persuading them after they arrive. There's like an assistance there that's shaping the outcome before the user even gets to take that first step. So in this new world where the assistant is, or the LLM or the model is forming that narrative before the user performs any action, how should brands think about conversions? How has that changed? How does that impact kind of the day to day?
Yeah, this is a big one because in web analytics, we love it to tie conversions to either HTTP referrers or UTM tracking parameters. And then we have this in our systems, can make all of these nice reports. I have a story from one of our clients. They looked in their web analytics and they saw 0% of leads are coming from ChatGPT. They didn't believe it. So they started, for everybody who filled out the contact form, to ask, where did you hear about us? And then 2% of people said Perplexity and 21% said ChatGPT. So almost a quarter of their leads actually heard about them in an LLM answer. But that was never visible in the traditional web analytics because there was no click, right? Because what happens is people either type the brand name into Google and then we think it's a brand search on Google, or people just start typing it into the Omni bar or the address bar in their browser. And then we think again, oh yeah, it's direct brand traffic. Awesome, my brand marketing works. When in reality, a lot of this is what I would call dark chat traffic. So similar to how we had dark social traffic 10 years ago when people didn't know yet how to attribute clicks that are coming from the Facebook app, for example, because it didn't send an HTTP referrer. Similar thing is happening with the Gen AI chatbots at the moment. Our brand gets mentioned there, people take an action, they convert, they spend money, but we do not have attribution in most cases. And I think brand marketers actually often get this topic more easily than, for example, SEOs or performance marketers. Because in brand marketing, you're used to this. If you run a TV ad, you have like a time slot where you know that's when additional clicks are happening. But with an out-of-home campaign, for example, you don't even have exact time slots when people see your out-of-home advertisements. So you often do like geographical targeting, like we do out-of-home only in one city, then you compare that city to other cities. Or we have a panel of users and we ask them to find out stuff like brand awareness, top of mind, assisted brand recall, unassisted brand recall, etc., etc. And I think optimizing for these Gen AI chatbots, we have to see it in a similar way. We need a panel of prompts that we track. And yes, it is not every prompt in the world. And yes, most prompts are unique and people might use slightly different wordings. It's all true. But at the end, it can act as a panel that while it doesn't cover everything, it covers enough for me to understand if the measures that I'm taking are working or not. The nice thing about this LLM-based panel is I can actually run my prompts every single day. So I get like an updated panel every single day. So I can have a baseline and then see, did my content strategy work? Am I now the source more often? Because of this, am I being mentioned more often in the answers? Am I more visible? And because of maybe a campaign I ran on a third-party website, is this website now mentioning more often? And again, when this website is cited, is my brand then mentioned more often by the LLMs? And thinking about it that way, I think, is a huge unlock for people, because I know so many SEOs who I feel like they're sticking their head in the sand, because they are like, I come from this world of keywords, but I don't see any keywords in ChatGPT. And I'm used to having like a very high search volume on very few keywords. And now suddenly every prompt is unique. And also I don't know the prompts. So I think like disconnecting yourself from this expectation that we have from SEO of the past or from performance marketing to have perfect attribution, and getting a little bit more inspired by how brand marketers are working, and maybe treating a recommendation from an LLM similar to like word of mouth or recommendations from people. Like, I don't know, I'm using a Logitech mouse and I'm really happy with it because the buttons are silent. I just recommended a product to you and to the listeners, But this is nowhere in the analytics of Logitech, right? They will never
Yeah.
know about this. But maybe somebody is now buying it. And
Yeah.
I would see it similarly with the LLMs. It's like there are these artificial recommendations running around, and they
Yeah.
have an impact of my business, and I need to find ways to track and approximate them.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's massively, massively underestimated, both by people who've worked in SEO, but also the brands on kind of how to leverage that. Because in that traditional search journey, we had, if you were a brand, you had the opportunity to change the perception or change that viewpoint after the click had happened. So you could land on a really, really polished page, guide a user through really, really curated messaging, gradually earn trust. Whereas with an AI or an LLM journey, it's already done all of that on your behalf. So the user's first impression is formed so much before they even see you, which means it's a complete shift. As you said, it's that brand visibility part. It's kind of reverse engineering the typical search journey into something that maybe people aren't that comfortable with. And I think the practical implication is brands need to optimize for all of the moments before that journey begins to be part of that conversation. So they need to influence how the model explains their product, how it compares them against competitors, and what qualities it chooses to emphasize, just so you've got as much data that's available to you so that you can actually take action about it. So we're not driving clicks, but it's earning preference at the point where all of those different types of intent are shaped, whether you're in discovery phase or you're looking at consideration, and it's that shift from the post-click persuasion, I guess, into pre-click influence. I guess probably one of the most strategically significant changes we've seen in digital marketing, for sure, at least in the last couple of years. And I think maybe one of the things that isn't talked about enough is how that matters for different industries. So we see, for example, something like finance would historically has been quite temperamental within EEAT guidelines on your money, your life, and those SEO metrics that we look. But something like LLMs, that threshold for trust is really, really high. So the models are only going to elevate sources that are really verified and compliant. But then we see another shift in retail and e-commerce, which is probably the biggest area of expansion, I guess the biggest behavioral change, as it were, where all of that comparison is happening within LLMs. The model is reading PDPs, reviews, who's generated content across all of those categories, and will attribute sentiment in different ways across marketplaces, or the model might favor a competitor when the brand has like really strong SEO that backs it. So it's again that first mover advantage is really powerful. And I think that reinforces the point that that trust is triggered in different ways, and all across the different platforms, consistency is no longer optional. So the brands that understand how their category is interpreted by AI can shape that narrative, and those that are just kind of leaving LLMs to determine which version they want to kind of show up are really going to be negatively impacted by not kind of controlling all of that truth. From the peak data, from kind of your conversations that you're having with brands, are you seeing anywhere that's having kind of the most disruption in that area? Kind of what's driving a lot of that pressure?
Yeah, I think in terms of money and leads, complex B2B products, both B2B
Okay.
SaaS, B2B services. There's a study from G2, the software review website. And G2 has every incentive in the world to create a study where the outcome is that software review websites are the number one source people use when deciding to buy a software. But even in their study this year, the outcome was that Gen AI chatbots are the number one source for people buying enterprise software or like business software. And then software review websites are still number two source, but the number one source are these Gen AI chatbots. So that shows how big the influence there is. Or also the example I used earlier where the almost 25% of leads were coming from Gen AI bots, chatbots. That was also a B2B services business. So in this industry, I think it's already such a huge part of the user journey. And then there are also business models where I think they have to rethink how the whole company works. Journalism is one of these areas, because most news and media publishers, they used to make money by having people on their website, a lot of people, and then showing them ads. It was a reach-based business model. If you had double the amount of visitors, you could make double the amount of money. But now, when people get the answer within an LLM-based search or answer engine, they don't need to go to the publisher anymore. And this will have huge impacts for them. And the same is true for all of these affiliates, price comparison, product aggregation websites. A website like Skyscanner, They only make money when people visit the Skyscanner website, right? They don't make money if ChatGPT finds the cheapest price via Skyscanner and then says it's a Lufthansa flight, and then somebody goes to Lufthansa and buys it there. All of these reach and affiliate-based business models really have to rethink how they participate in this new ecosystem. And in the past, SEO was usually one of their main traffic drivers. And if the clicks are going away, and actually it's not if, it's when.
Yeah.
And it's more like when they continue to go away, because for some kinds of contents, the clicks are already gone. Like many publishers have minus 50%, minus 70% traffic on their evergreen content. They will need to adjust and adapt to that.
And I think it's maybe that element of specific industry-led trends and industry-led insights maybe isn't being considered enough. And there may be an attitude from some marketers that a one-size-fits-all strategy for AI visibility and for LLM optimization and looking this new way of AI search is being ingrained into the way they're working. And really, we need to think about all of these different angles, not least all of the different differentiators that exist across those different verticals. Before we, I guess, jump into some more of the tactical bits, I guess sort of very neatly takes us on to the next part, which is around kind of highlighting some of those pitfalls that we're seeing and the fact that a lot of brands are chasing those citations without strengthening all of the data set that sits underneath it. And so they're building content that's really strong thematically, but factually inconsistent, or they're investing in a single model, a big focus on ChatGPT and ignoring all of the differences between the different models and all of those kind of varieties that exist. And these shortcuts are, I guess, slightly efficient, but they will kind of collapse over time, and there's a ton of longevity in it. So, Malte, what mistakes do you see most often from brands looking at attempting to optimize for AI search and AI visibility?
I mean, the most observed mistake I have is just not doing anything for it.
Okay.
But let's look at the ones that are doing something. There are a couple of things that work very well right now where it's guaranteed that they cannot continue to work that well. For example, if you are selling a CRM software for dentists, you can create on your own website an article, top 10 CRM softwares for dentists, and rank yourself number one. And this is often then ranking in these typical fan-out queries used by the LLMs, and then it's being used as a source, and it's cited, and you get recommended in the answer. And you can actually create 5 such articles. You can also do 5 best cheap CRM solutions for dentists 2025, and the 7 best CRM solutions for dentists 2025. So that you cover all of the fan-out queries, most recommended ones, etc., etc. Can play around with it. And the articles themselves, they can even be written by an LLM. And it works right now. Especially if you have an established brand, it works. And I have seen some B2B SaaS companies that literally have 20, 30, 40, 50 very much overlapping listicles on their websites about their own niche where they are in, and then always ranking themselves number one, of course. And it works amazingly well right now, especially for Perplexity and for Google AI overviews. But this is spam. Let's be realistic here. This is spam. This content only exists to manipulate LLM answers, and there will be some form of algorithm update, maybe even a penalty, and both the LLM labs and also Bing and Google themselves as search engines will react at some point and will no longer rank this. And if you are the number 5 in your market, I mean, go for it. Yeah, what do you have to lose? You will definitely win some clients, you will close some deals. But if you are the number 1 in the market, really think about if you want to dilute your brand, want to dilute trust from customers with this kind of behavior. Because if I land on this page, if I'm an SEO, I know what's going on. But if I didn't know why people are doing this, I would think they are complete lunatics as a CRM solution for dentists to create a top 10 list of CRM solutions for dentists. I mean, it's obviously not good content, right? They're just going to put themselves on position 1. And the most extreme things I've seen is there is a software, I will not name them, it's an SEO software. They have such a list and they put themselves on position 1. And do you know what is the second best SEO tool according to them? It's their free browser plugin. And one competitor of ours, they have an article, it says top 10 best AI search tools. And then there's a list and it has only a single entry. And of course that's themselves. Great. So it starts with first and then there's nothing else behind it. So, yeah, I think this is really questionable. I know why they do it. I know it works. I know as SEOs we like to do these sneaky things, but I would be really, really careful there. And
Yeah.
then another thing is some social media websites or user-generated content websites are often a source. This Reddit, especially in English-speaking countries, is so often cited by almost all LLMs. Those are communities, and humans
Yeah.
are reading them and moderating them. And there's this pattern of even very large brands going in there with fake accounts, asking fake questions, and then writing fake answers. People will notice this, and you can get yourself permanently in bad standing with the community by doing that.
So let's turn slightly to the more practical playbook. So brands are always asking what they can do now that moves the needle. What can we getting stuck into? What's going to make the biggest difference in the short term? And I think these short-term gains exist, but they rely on improving the clarity and the credibility rather than chasing the loopholes like you've just mentioned around the top 10 listicles or looking specifically at kind of Reddit optimization. On the Reddit point, it's something we get sort of dangled quite a lot from brands at the moment. It's like, why aren't we on Reddit? Why don't we just insert ourselves into a lot of these forums? And we're having to do a lot of pushback in there to say that, one, we need to understand what the data is telling us around where the biggest areas of focus and the biggest areas of opportunity are. So looking at a visibility audit and trying to dig into that data, but also there's no great evidence to support a case for um, in, kind of integrating into Reddit and doing kind of that activities. From what you've seen and kind of some of the work that you've done, what are some of the short-term actions that a brand can take to improve their visibility relatively quickly without looking at things like huge content structures or rewrites of their entire portfolio?
Yeah, so for small brands or even like one-person brands, the most impactful thing is to describe yourself consistently online. So let's say you have an SEO offering for lawyers, and on your homepage it says, I'm an SEO agency for lawyers. Then don't write on your LinkedIn, I'm a legal-focused visibility manager. Or in your press release, then it's like search visibility services for legal companies. Rather, stick to a few words that describe yourself and your offering and use that consistently on your homepage, on your LinkedIn entry, on the LinkedIn profile of the founder or the CEO, in your Google Maps entry, your Yelp profile, in the footer of your press releases, everywhere. And this really helps so much. So for a small brand, describe yourself consistently.
Okay.
And then put a couple of prompts into ChatGPT that you think your target audience would use to find you, and look at the sources. If the sources are always your competitors, think if you can create similar content in better quality than your competitors, and if it fits your brand, if it fits the user journey, etc., don't embarrass yourself unless you're into that. But if it's like, if they actually have helpful content and you think you can do better, that can be one way to get cited, become the source, and that way also get your brand mentioned. If it's something like review website, convince happy customers to give you good reviews. If it's LinkedIn, think about writing LinkedIn Pulse articles. Again, don't embarrass yourself. Understand also humans will read this and judge you for it. If it's mainly editorial websites, digital PR is probably the main thing to do. Unless it's like in news websites with a lot of affiliate links in the article, then it probably wasn't written by a journalist, but by their content commerce team. Then give them a call and offer them better affiliate rates than whoever is currently listed there. And often that magically will lead to you being included, even potentially on top. And you don't offer them these good affiliate rates because you expect so much traffic from their article. You do it because their article is cited by LLMs and you want to influence the answer. If you see TikTok, Instagram, YouTube as the top sources, YouTube is often a source. TikTok and Instagram really depends on the topic. You can either work with creators, or you can also think about your own content strategy. Don't do this just to influence AI answers, right? Like don't build a whole channel, because this is a long-term commitment. But just think about if it fits you to produce your own channels, if you have budget to work with creators, with influencers, get maybe a few keywords into the titles or into the descriptions of what they produce, and that can also boost your visibility a lot.
Maybe building on that first point around the consistency of the footprint, I think the other thing that we're seeing in that same, I guess with that same lens, is PDPs and e-commerce platforms, and also the now growing importance of PDPs. I guess traditionally e-commerce PDP is just like a conversion asset, whereas I think in AI search has become like a big source of truth, and LLMs are interrogating those PDPs in the same way that a human would, and they're looking for the clarity and the structure and the factual precision. So if we're saying a PDP is vague or overly branded or missing some of those attributes that make it unique, the model that won't try to interpret it. It'll sort of either guess, which introduces a ton of risk around how your product is being displayed, or it just removes the product entirely from those comparisons. And I think that reality means that in AI, it's almost much more damaging than a kind of a low ranking, because you're just being kind of completely omitted from it. The users never even become aware of you being an option. And I think that builds on that second issue, which is the fragmentation. So brands have different versions of the same product across like their own site, a marketplace like Amazon, or a retailer PDP, or international websites. And there's such little consistency across how those are managed and what the messaging should be and kind of what the focus area of it is. So I think the task for brands now is treat those PDPs as kind of structured data assets, not as just kind of standalone sales pages or something that potentially would have driven a conversion before, because they hold so much more weight now. So they need to be focusing on things like clarity. They need to look at definitive information on whether it's like ingredients or materials or sizing or sustainability and all of those other elements that need to be incorporated into it. And it's a big shift that a PDP is no longer just a point of conversion. It's a point of interpretation. And I think maybe the brands that will win will be the ones that make it as easy as possible for them to understand and glean that information. I wanted to touch on ChatGPT Shopper, something that's accelerating some of the e-commerce integration and revisiting some of the PDP elements. So I think it's quite a clear signal of where discovery and comparison journeys are heading. And I think users are increasingly going to outsource some of that activity, where early stages of decisioning and consideration are going to be done by an assistant. And if ChatGPT Shopper becomes that mainstream behavior, brands won't just compete for visibility, it'll become inclusion within those buying journeys. So the brands that have invested in that clean, structured data are going to be the ones that, as ChatGPT Shopper, are going to feel really confident in recommending. Given what we're seeing with that, how do you think the buying journey is going to change? Like, as they take on more of that research, their comparison, kind of what are the data points that you're seeing that where brands are best positioned to benefit from this shift into kind of more agent-led shopping?
Yeah, I think we need to make a big differentiation between brands and then pure merchants who sell multiple brands, right? I think for the brands, this is neither a threat nor an opportunity, or it is both. Because it's just a behavior and how people discover, but people will probably spend the same amount of money on sneakers and t-shirts with AI search as they did without it. And there are still products where discovery might happen via other channels like social media. I think for the merchants, it's more extreme, because a lot of the things that I used a merchant for in the past, finding the right product, validating that it's a good product by looking at user reviews, going on Amazon and filtering by only show me products with at least 4 stars, right? If I buy something where I have zero knowledge and zero emotional investment, that was always a good filter. Reading maybe curated product reviews. All of these things, I don't need to visit a merchant anymore. I can do it in chat. That means that there's this huge risks for merchant that they are reduced to the people who hold the inventory, so I have all the risk. And then they do shipping and returns and customer support. And that is, of course, not what merchants want, right? They want people to visit their shop, to understand their brand, start loving them, being repeat customers. So I think there's a very, very huge problem and threat for them. And one hypothesis I have is the factory to LLM concept. So I believe in the past it was difficult for factories, primarily in China, to start a brand, do the marketing, do the branding, so they would just sell like white label, right? Let other people handle this idea of creating a brand. But now with AI, I think everybody is able to create a somewhat passable brand identity, packaging, etc., etc. And I believe that especially for products where human in the loop will be a small part, it could work that factories just send their product feed to an LLM and then just sell directly and circumvent all the merchants. And then the LLM or the LLM-based chat interface becomes the new merchant, so to speak, or at least a new marketplace or new aggregator. For brands, I think the important thing is make sure that LLMs have as much data from you as possible, If you have an online shop that creates a product feed, share that with the LLMs, try to get in there. If you see any kind of shopping agent on your website, you need to make a decision. Do you want the shopping agent to buy on your website or not? Some brands will decide against it because, again, they want this human to experience it. Personally, I think you should make anything that's possible to allow agents to easily buy on your website, which can include offering buying via MCP, looking at ChatGPT's agentic commerce protocol, look at all the other protocols that are floating around, and then make sure that when agents are on your website that they actually can complete the purchase. There are actually some usability things you can do to make it easier for merchant to understand what the buttons are. And usually I'm a huge hater on LLMs.txt, but explaining to AI agents how to use your website and your online shop, like we have category pages, this is an example. We have product pages, this is an example. There are filters on the category page, these are examples. This can actually be super useful because an agent that is trying to use your shop might actually want to use your LLMs.txt, while a search engine will always ignore it because they know it's like meta keywords. That is an opportunity to make it as easy as possible for AI agents to buy on your shop. But this year, I would not expect to make any money with that, and we will have to see if there are actually sales happening next year. But definitely, I see a future where a lot of my shopping will be done by an agent. And maybe even without my knowledge. Like in the US, if Amazon has a product and they no longer, that they are not offering or that's sold out, there are already cases where an agent from Amazon goes to Walmart and buys it and ships it to me. And as far as I know, Walmart is not a fan of that. So there are already cases where you can do very interesting things with agents, and users might not even be aware.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Malta, for joining me. I think just to wrap up very briefly, we've gone through a lot today, and I think fundamentally, what I want to summarize a little bit is that brands that win in AI search will be the ones that, I guess, treat visibility as a reflection of their total digital behavior, not a byproduct of their website, which we talked about in a little bit of depth. It's no longer enough to be just optimized. We have to be coherent, we have to be trusted, we have to be the source that the model feels super confident in reporting. And I guess that's the new definition of authority and the definition of visibility. Thank you so much, Malta, for bringing your expertise and your insight to this session. And if this discussion has sparked any questions about visibility or sentiment, citations, or the consistency of your digital ecosystem, we're happy to support you in that journey. So thank you very much for watching, and look forward to the next session in the series.
Thanks for having me.